Hey guys, welcome to my build guide of the Fireball Ignite Trickster. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what I'm going to talk about. First thing is scaling our Ignite damage, the tree, the gear, the flasks and the jewels, and I'm going to go over the links that I'm using. And if you want to skip to a specific topic in the video, I'm going to leave timestamps down below. Have a lot of fun. So how do we actually scale our Ignite damage? One of the best ways to do this is by increasing the base damage of the skill gem that we are using. How do we achieve this is by increasing the level of the spell skill gem. So you ideally want to get a tabula rasa or any other chest piece that is corrupted with +2 level of socketed AoE or projectile gems, or both with a double corrupted chest. You can get up to +5 with a skin of the loyal. You can also get a +2 level of socketed gems, and with the double corrupt +40 or 50 increased damage, which is also really great. But for the end game, you really want to go for the +4 of socketed gems in your tabula rasa. To even further increase this is you have a new modifier on a shield or also on a wand and scepter, which is the +1 to level of all fire spell skill gems. So we can increase our level of the fireball even further. To then further increase the fireball damage, you can grab stuff like from your Flame Golem, increased damage. You can also increase these even further with increased damage over time, elemental damage, fire damage, burning damage, which you can get on a jewel or on a scepter, which I do not happen to roll that yet. You can increase it even further with fire damage over time multiplier, which is, after the skill gem level increase, probably the second best thing to scale actually your ignite damage, because it is a more damage multiplier and that scales very, very well. Another source of a damage increase is -2 fire res, and not to be confused with fire penetration, because we do not want to penetrate any resistances. We need to lower the enemy's resistances in general. In order to achieve that, you can have flammability, which gives cursed enemies have -45% to fire resistance, or a helm mod, which gives -9% fire resistance to nearby enemies. Also, you can use Wave of Conviction, since we are using dealing a lot of fire damage. Exposure applies -25% to elemental resistance, matching highest damage taken. Since our highest damage is fire damage, we are applying -25% fire exposure. So let's go over the tree in general for a bit. Just pathing around here, taking these damage over time nodes. In the beginning, you don't have to travel down here. You can though, because it's a huge damage increase early on. You're not picking up these nodes until very, very late, like level 80 plus or something. I'm level 90 right now, and I happen to pick these up from level 80 to 90. Ideally, you want to first go for the damage nodes, because if shit is not dying, you know, you're getting shit on. So you're not picking up all of these life nodes in the beginning. Just skip them, travel through here, go up here, take these life nodes, grab this huge fire cluster, which gives a whole shit ton of damage. If you can afford it, which is really cheap actually, you can anoint your amulet rather early on in the game with Arsonist, which is a huge damage increase, and otherwise you're never going to path down here. Get a Rolling Flames jewel, or preferably 2, very, very early on in the game. And then yeah, grabbing some area of effect. You're not needing a whole lot of this because of the +4 to radius with your rolling flames, and general just picking up life, elemental damage where you can, fire damage over time multiplier. So this is rather basic. So I'm level 19 now. For the last like 5 to 6 points, I'm probably going to take maybe frenzy charges, maybe the power charges over here, because we are scaling these very well with our swift killer. You can also grab stuff like for a 5-pointer spiritual aid and start increasing our ignite damage by further scaling minion damage, which is also possible. Yeah, all sorts of stuff, but really the last few points are really up to you, what you need in your build with your gear and stuff like that. So that the last points are really dependent. But the base structure of the tree you can see right here. And that's it for the tree. What I forgot to mention is the ascendancy. The first thing you really want to grab is Patient Reaper, because it's a huge damage increase early on and a huge quality of life improvement with the recover life on kill, energy shield on kill, and especially mana on kill. So you're not really having to worry about any of your life problems or mana problems. Second, I did go with Weave the Arcane because it's just giving us more attack and cast speed for our fireball and shield charge, so we are not feeling like stuck in a place or limited by our shield charging ability. And it also comes with a nice little bonus of movement skills cost no mana, and also 20% chance to recover 10% of mana when you use a skill. Paired with Patient Reaper, we are never having any mana problems whatsoever. I picked Weave the Arcane second because at that point I did not need any more damage. Everything was dying rather quickly, and for my Merciless Lab I did go with Swift Killer to gain even more damage in order to progress into high yellow, low red maps, and in order to progress into higher red maps or even Guardians, Shaper, Uber Elder, you're going to want to get Prolonged Pain. So now for the gear section, there's only one thing really mandatory, which is the Snake Pit ring in the left ring slot. So our projectiles from spells can actually fork, so we are not wasting a link on our main skill in order to get our fireball to fork. So this is really the only really mandatory unique in this build that you need. Other than that, on a helmet, you ideally want the enchant with 40% increased fireball damage, which is really cheap. You're just going to buy a clean helmet with the enchant for like 5 to 10 C, and then going to fossil spam it with, I think, Scorched and Pristine fossils, in order to get some reasonable life rolls, maybe some resist rolls, but you're really looking for a high life roll, paired with the mod that gives nearby enemies have -9% fire resistance. And that's about it for the helmet. The amulet, I've got a really nutty amulet over here. You don't need this. Ideally, you want to look for fire damage over time multiplier, some fire damage, some life, maybe some resistances, really just stuff that you need in order to make your build work. You know, if you need some resistances on the amulet, you can get it. You know, just look out for the fire damage over time multiplier and a really high life roll. Going down to the rings, besides having a snake pit ring, I would recommend a opal ring for even more damage. You can roll increased fire damage like I have on this one, you need a really high life roll, or you want a really high life roll. Maybe looking for some resistances on it, but really you can go for a whole lot of stuff on the rings. But ideally you want a opal ring, maybe a 2-stone ring if you have trouble with capping your resistances, or the new released ring, which is called, I think, Vermilion or something, which gives % increased maximum life, which is also really great. But I did go with a opal ring for even more damage. You just want to get some fire damage, life, resistances, maybe some stats on there. Whatever you can grab or whatever you need actually for your build. The body armor is very, very important in this build because this lets us scale our damage very, very good. I've got a tabula rasa with +2 to level of socketed AoE gems or projectile gems, which is really cheap. Ideally for endgame you want to have a double corrupted tabula rasa or a other chest, or a perfectly would fit here a Skin of the Loyal with double corrupted, +2 to AoE gems or projectile gems. You are going to get a +5 to your fireball from this. But really you don't need this at all. You can just have a clean tabula rasa, you can have a 6-link without the corrupted implicit, but I would really recommend using a tabula rasa with the +2 to level of socketed AoE gems, because this is really cheap and gives a huge damage boost. Going over to our weapons, you can use 2 wands or 2 scepters. But I would recommend using a shield, so you can use shield charge, because this is a really fast playstyle and lets you really zoom through the maps. And with the new introduced modifier, +1 to level of all fire spell skill gems, shields aren't really that bad. In a shield you're probably looking for increased fire damage again. The +1 to level of all fire spell skill gems should have the highest priority on your shield. Then get some life. I've got only 32 life. Yeah, this is a really meme roll. But you know it's working. Just get some resistances, life, fire damage, but really mandatory is the +1 to level of all fire spell skill gems. Same with the scepter. There you want to have a really, really high roll of fire damage over time multiplier, and ideally the +1 to level of all fire spell skill gems, which I did not happen to get yet, but I've got a tier 1 fire damage over time multiplier mod, a really high fire damage roll. Look for a good base scepter. Mine only has 22% increased elemental damage. I think it goes up to like 40%. Get some increased damage on there, maybe some attack speed for your shield shards, so that's a huge quality of life improvement. Going down to the gloves, really you can use anything there, any rare gloves with some life, resistances, maybe you're going to need some stats, you know, really up to you what you want there. But I can tell you life is really good. You can get a fire damage over time multiplier roll on there, which is quite rare and quite expensive from what I have seen so far. But I mean, you can get it, you don't have to. It's just a further damage increase. You can also go for a rampage glove like the Null and Void, which is kinda expensive on its own, like 1 Exalt plus. You don't need it, but it will make the build even more smooth. For the boots, I was just experimenting with this. You can really use any rare boots, or you should use any rare boots, because right now I have only got 4.5k life, which is really low, but you can further increase this to around 5.5k, even 6k if you're really pushing it. But in order to achieve that, you are going to need some rare boots with a really nice life roll. I experimented with Wind Shriek because you can apply an additional curse, and we are using flammability. And I also wanted to test the Despair Curse aura for single target, but it's kind of a letdown, so I'm going to change these boots again. So really just any rare boots with high life, resistances, more than 25% increased movement speed, and that's about it. Nothing too special. For a belt, you really want to have a Stygian Vice belt because you want a Abyss socket in there in order to free up a flask slot, so you can use another flask. Just get the chance to gain onslaught for 4 seconds on kill, and I would really recommend to go this for 7 or 8%, and maybe a little life roll. The increased movement speed, if you've killed recently, is not needed. It's just a little bonus. For the rolls on the belt, just get some generic life, maybe elemental damage, fire damage, resistances. This is a really shitty belt I have got right here. Really low life roll, you know, so you can push these even further. You don't really need the fire or elemental damage right here, but it's a nice plus to have. That's about it for the gear, actually. So now for the flasks, you want a instant recovery divine life flask. The second mod is really up to you. I've happened to go with immunity to freeze and chill during flask effect. Make sure to quality your flasks. Not what I did. Then I'm going with a granite flask, which has the mod on it 99% increased armor during flask effect. So we are getting a huge chunk physical damage reduction only from this flask. So now we have 13%. If I pop the flask, we go up to 52%. Combined with our shield charge and fortify on hit, this is a really good damage mitigation. The sulfur flask, you can really, this is not necessary. You can swap this out for a dying sun, so you get more projectiles. Your fork is even better then. Get some more area of effect with the dying sun. Really, you can swap the sulfur flask out for whatever you want. You want a Quicksilver flask with just increased movement speed on it, increased effect, and last but not least a Witchfire brew, just for the increased damage over time during flask effect, which is just more damage. The grants level 21 Despair Curse aura, you can just ignore this, you don't need this. So now for the jewels, I already did go over the Abyss jewel, just get some life on it. Really mandatory is the chance to gain onslaught on kill, and just some other stuff, maybe some resistances, stats, whatever you need. In order to make this work, you need to have at least one Rolling Flames jewels. I happen to go with 2 because it just feels better, the overall clear, you know, with the increased radius. I recommend getting 1 Rolling Flames jewel with the Corrupted Blood implicit. Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you. This is really cheap. I bought this for 3C, I think. For rare jewels, you want to get something like this: fire damage over time multiplier, maximum life, burning damage, fire damage. What I've got over here. Wait, where's my other jewel? Here. Yeah, really just fire damage over time multiplier, really big damage boost, the burning damage, fire damage, and increased maximum life. So now for the links and skills in this build, I am using Wave of Conviction to actually proc the fire exposure. Exposure applies minus 25% to elemental resistance, matching highest damage taken. And since we are dealing a shit ton of fire damage, we get minus 25% fire exposure. I did couple this with increased duration and faster casting. Faster casting just to not lock me down in place, and increased duration to actually further increase the debuff duration. In my helmet, I've got the Flame Blast, more specifically the Valve Flame Blast for our single target, and this is only a 4-link setup and it melts every map boss so far. Valve Flame Blast, ideally level 21, with combustion support, burning damage, and deadly aimants. Whenever we are entering a map boss, we are just popping Valve Flame Blast and he just disintegrates into nothing. For the shield, I've got Malevolence as an aura, which is really nice to boost our damage even more. It's a more damage over time multiplier. You really need to get Malevolence. Highly mandatory for this build. Flame Dash, I've also got Shield Charge, but with Shield Charge you can't get over gaps or some obstacles, so I'm actually having Flame Dash equipped as well, and a Flame Golem to even increase our damage even further. For our main links, we've got Fireball, ideally level 21, linked to Ignite Proliferation. Early on just Elemental Proliferation, but make sure you swap this out for Ignite Proliferation, because it has this little line: supported skills deal 41% more damage with Ignite. You definitely need the Ignite Proliferation, because otherwise your AoE is going to suck, and you want to ignite as many things as possible, and that is going to make it happen. Deadly ailments, just a damage, support, burning damage as well. Greater multiple projectiles, so actually that you are shooting more projectiles. With a dying sun, you are increasing this to 6 additional projectiles, which each projectile can then fork, which is really crazy for map clear. And a combustion support, which also gives us minus 90% to fire resistance for the enemy, and more fire damage actually. In my gloves I've got Stormbrand with Curse on Hit, Flammability, and increased critical strikes. Stormbrand is actually there to proc our Elemental Overload. I linked this with increased critical strike support, so we can proc Elemental Overload more reliably, because we are not actually scaling any crit whatsoever. So we need our Stormbrand to actually crit to activate Elemental Overload. And I've also linked this with a Curse on Hit and a Flammability, just for even more single target damage. So while mapping, if you need the damage, which most of the time you don't need to drop down your Stormbrand, but maybe in very high red tier maps with more life multiplier mods on the map, you're going to need it. But as of right now, I'm not using it while mapping, only for the map bosses. So I'm popping these down, get my Elemental Overload with the Curse on Hit, the Flammability, and this is just really nice. Some people are using Orb of Storms, which I would not recommend, because Orb of Storms places it right where your character is, just on top of it, and in order to proc then Elemental Overload with Orb of Storms, you have to really get into the fight, and the danger of dying from that from a high map boss is really high. So I would recommend using Stormbrand. For my movement, I am using Shield Charge with Fortify support and faster attacks. Faster attacks just so, you know, it feels smoother. So you can also get some attack speed on your scepter for it to feel even smoother. Also, the Weave the Arcane gives 20% increased attack speed, which is also really nice for our movement ability. So we pretty much just zooming all over the map with Shield Charge. I've also coupled this with a Fortify support, which is actually really nice because casters don't have a lot of damage mitigation, and Fortify gives us exactly that, 20% damage mitigation. I just recently started using Herald of Ash for even more cleanup while mapping. If you can't pick it, afford it in your build, you know, because of mana issues or whatever, you don't have to, you know, it's just a little quality of life. So like maybe 1 or 2 mobs get left behind sometimes, and Herald of Ash is able to actually clear those out without actually going back. So yeah, that's actually about it. So if you've got any improvements for the build or any recommendations, please let me know in the comment section below. And thank you guys for watching, and have a nice day. See you next time.